The dust of the trail rises beneath the relentless sun of the American West. An old man walks with steady but weary steps, carrying more than his few belongings. He carries the dignity of one who chose compassion over obedience, love over fear, life over profit. This is the story of Matthew Reynolds, a ranch foreman whose kind heart defied the most powerful man in a region, and how a calf condemned to death became an instrument of justice that no one could predict. Welcome to a story that teaches us that every act of kindness plants seeds that germinate at the exact moment, even though we may wait years to see their fruits. I invite you to stay with us until the end of this extraordinary account, and to share your reflections and experiences in the comments. Because this story, my friends, could forever change the way you view compassion and destiny. In the year 1958, across the arid lands of West Texas, sprawled the Triple Creek Ranch, an immense property where cattle grazed beneath a sky that seemed to have no end. It was an era when men earned their living by the sweat of their brow and where each animal represented the difference between prosperity and ruin. The ranch belonged to Armand Collins, a ruthless businessman who had transformed those lands into a cattle empire. For him, each head of cattle was a figure in his ledgers, nothing more. There worked Matthew Reynolds, everyone called him Matt, a ranch foreman of 62 years who knew the range like the back of his hand. He'd dedicated 40 years of his life to that ranch, starting as a simple hand and becoming the most respected foreman in the entire region. His weathered hands could calm the wildest bull, and his brown eyes had seen thousands of animals born and die. But Matt didn't live alone. With him lived his grandson Michael, a 14-year-old boy who'd arrived at the ranch 4 years earlier, orphaned after his parents died in an automobile accident. The old man had taken in the boy and raised him with love, teaching him not just the craft of ranching, but the values that would guide his entire life. Michael, son, Matt would say while they rode supervising the cattle, a true cowboy doesn't just know how to handle livestock. He understands that each animal has its own soul, its own fears, its own needs. When we treat animals with respect, they return it to us 100-fold. Michael absorbed every word from his grandfather like a thirsty sponge. He'd learned to rise before dawn, to recognize weather signs, to treat injuries in animals with traditional remedies that Matt had inherited from his ancestors. Armand Collins visited the ranch once a month, always with his general manager, a hard man named Richard who supervised all operations with an iron fist. The boss's visits made all the workers nervous, because he was a demanding man who expected maximum efficiency. Reynolds, Armand would say during his inspections, "You know I run a business, not an animal sanctuary. Every head of cattle on this ranch must justify its existence by producing meat or calves. Those that don't produce must be eliminated without hesitation." This philosophy constantly clashed with Matt's compassionate mentality, but the old man was wise enough not to directly confront his employer. It was the beginning of autumn 1961 when the event occurred that would change everyone's destiny. Michael was then 17 years old and had developed an exceptional ability to work with cattle, almost as if he'd inherited his grandfather's natural talent. One September morning, when Matt and Michael arrived at the corrals for routine work, they found something alarming. A young cow named Dove lay on the ground breathing with difficulty, with glassy eyes and discharge coming from her nose. "Grandpa," said Michael with concern, "what's wrong with Dove?" Matt examined the animal with his decades of experience, and what he saw worried him deeply. The symptoms indicated a contagious disease that could spread to the entire herd. "Michael, this cow is very sick. Could be foot and mouth disease. We need to separate her immediately and notify the boss." But the situation worsened when they discovered that beside Dove was a calf barely 2 weeks old who also showed worrying symptoms. The little calf, whom Michael had named Thunder for his fighting spirit since birth, was Dove's son and now also struggled to survive. He was a beautiful calf, with reddish coat and a white star on his forehead, with large, intelligent eyes that seemed to plead for help. "Grandpa," said Michael approaching the sick animal, "we have to help Thunder. He's just a baby." Armand arrived that same afternoon with Richard and the veterinarian, Dr. Vargas. After examining the animals, the diagnosis was devastating. "Mr. Collins," said the veterinarian, "these animals have a severe viral infection, highly contagious. For the cow we can attempt treatment, but the calf has little chance of survival." Armand didn't hesitate for a second. "Reynolds, put down that calf immediately and disinfect the entire corral. If this disease spreads, it could cost me a fortune." The order fell like a hammer on Matt's heart. "Sir," he said in a respectful but hopeful voice, "couldn't we try treating him first? He's just a small calf, maybe with special care he could recover." "Reynolds," Armand responded with impatience, "you know I don't run a charity. That animal represents a risk to my entire investment. It must be eliminated immediately." Michael, who'd heard the entire conversation, felt his heart breaking. He looked at Thunder, who lay weakly but still fought to live. "Grandpa," Michael whispered when Armand and the others moved away, "we can't let them kill Thunder. He's just a baby." Matt felt the weight of the contradiction between his values and the demands of his job. All his life he'd tried to balance his natural compassion with economic realities, but he'd never faced such a clear situation where both aspects were in direct conflict. That night, Matt stayed awake struggling with his decision. Michael also spent the night wakeful, visiting Thunder several times, bringing him fresh water and speaking to him softly. "Thunder," he'd whisper to the small animal, "I know you're sick, but you're strong. You can fight this." At dawn, Matt rose with a heavy heart, knowing he'd have to carry out the most difficult order of his career. He prepared his rifle and headed toward the corral, followed by Michael, who walked silently with tears in his eyes. When they arrived, they found Thunder standing, weak but clearly more alert than the night before. The calf had managed to stay on his feet and had drunk water. "Grandpa, look," said Michael with hope. "Thunder is better. He's standing, he's drinking water. Maybe he's recovering." Matt observed the calf carefully and had to admit Michael was right. Though still sick, he showed signs of improvement. It was in that moment that Matt made the most important decision of his life, a decision that would define his destiny and his grandson's. He looked at Michael, saw the tears in his eyes, saw the desperate hope in his face, and remembered all the lessons about compassion he'd tried to teach him. "Michael," he said finally, "you're right. This animal deserves a chance. But if we do this, we have to be prepared for the consequences." Without saying another word, Matt set his rifle aside, carefully lifted Thunder in his arms, and signaled Michael to follow him. During the following 3 weeks, grandfather and grandson became dedicated nurses to Thunder. They kept him hidden in a small pen behind their house, away from any visitor's sight. Matt applied all his knowledge of traditional veterinary medicine. He prepared infusions of medicinal herbs, applied poultices of healing plants, and made sure Thunder received adequate nutrition with fresh milk and natural supplements. Michael became the primary nurse, feeding him every few hours, keeping him clean, and providing the affection the animal needed. "Thunder," Michael would say while bottle-feeding him milk, "you have to get strong to prove we did the right thing." Gradually, day by day, Thunder began showing clear signs of recovery. His appetite returned, his eyes recovered their shine, his breathing normalized, and he began showing the playful energy natural to a healthy calf. By the end of the 3rd week, Thunder had made a complete and extraordinary recovery. Not only had he survived the disease that had killed his mother, but he'd strengthened to become a particularly robust calf. "Grandpa," said Michael one morning while they watched Thunder run happily, "we did it. Thunder is completely cured." "Yes, son," responded Matt, "but now we have a different problem. What are we going to do with him? We can't keep him hidden forever." The problem resolved itself unexpectedly when Armand arrived at the ranch for a surprise inspection. Richard had been supervising operations and had reported that the health crisis had been resolved with the sacrifice of the sick calf. But when Armand began his tour, he heard the unmistakable sound of a calf lowing from the direction of Matt's house. "What's that noise?" he asked suspiciously. "Reynolds!" Richard shouted. "Get over here immediately." Matt appeared quickly, followed by Michael, both with guilty expressions. They knew the moment of truth had arrived. "Reynolds," said Armand in a dangerously calm voice, "I believe I heard the sound of a calf coming from your house. Can you explain what's going on?" Matt looked at his grandson, saw the worry in his eyes, and made a decision that would demonstrate his moral courage. "Sir," he said with dignity, "the calf you ordered put down is alive. I couldn't kill him because I believed he deserved a chance." The confession fell like a bomb. Richard became furious immediately. Armand was speechless at the audacity of the disobedience. "You disobeyed a direct order from me," roared Armand when he recovered his voice. "You put my entire herd at risk to save a sick animal?" "Yes, sir," Matt responded without lowering his gaze. "And I want you to know the animal has recovered completely. He didn't represent the risk we thought." "That doesn't matter," Armand shouted. "An order is an order. You have no right to make decisions that go against my instructions." Michael, seeing his grandfather being attacked for doing the right thing, couldn't stay silent. "The calf is healthy," he shouted with courage. "Grandpa cured him. Thunder is stronger now than many calves that were never sick." "Be quiet, boy," Richard yelled at him. But Armand wanted to see the evidence with his own eyes. "Show me that animal," he ordered. Matt led the group toward the small pen, where Thunder grazed peacefully, showing all the signs of a completely healthy calf. It was evident the animal hadn't just survived, but had thrived. Armand examined Thunder with an expert eye. He had to admit the animal looked exceptional. His coat shone, his eyes were clear, his movements were strong. "This animal looks healthy," he admitted reluctantly, "but that doesn't change the fact that you disobeyed a direct order from me." He turned toward Matt with an expression of fury. "Reynolds, in 40 years working for me, you've never shown this type of insubordination. Your disobedience has crossed a line that cannot be forgiven." Matt waited for the sentence he knew would come. "You're leaving my ranch," Armand continued with a cold voice. "Tomorrow morning I want you and your grandson packed and gone. I won't tolerate employees who think they can ignore my orders." The words hit Matt like punches. 40 years of loyal work, 40 years of dedication, all destroyed in a moment by an act of compassion. Michael felt like the world was crumbling. The ranch had been his home for 4 years, the only stable home since his parents' death. "Sir," said Matt with one last attempt, "I've worked for you for 40 years without a single complaint. I've cared for your cattle as if they were my own. Doesn't that count for anything?" "It counted," Armand responded coldly, "until you decided you knew better than me how to manage MY cattle on MY property." That night, while packing their few belongings, Matt and Michael faced the reality of their new situation. At 62 years old, Matt would have to look for work at another ranch, without positive references from his most recent employer. "Grandpa," Michael said while packing, "did we do the right thing saving Thunder?" Matt looked at his grandson with wisdom gained through decades. "Michael, son, sometimes in life we have to choose between what's easy and what's right. Saving Thunder was right, even though it cost us dearly." "But now we don't have a home, we don't have work," said Michael with concern. "We have something more important," Matt responded. "We have our conscience clear. We can sleep knowing we didn't kill an innocent animal without giving him a chance." They faced the problem of what to do with Thunder. They couldn't abandon him after everything they'd fought to save him. "Grandpa," said Michael, "we can't leave Thunder here. After everything we went through, we can't abandon him." "You're right, son," said Matt. "Thunder comes with us. We'll find a way." At dawn, Matt and Michael departed from Triple Creek Ranch carrying only their personal belongings, their 2 horses and Thunder, who followed them docilely tied with a rope. The first 2 weeks were the hardest. They slept under the stars, ate frugally, and visited ranch after ranch looking for work. The problem was that Armand Collins was an influential man, and news of why Matt had been fired had spread quickly. Many saw him as a problematic employee who defied his boss's authority. "Reynolds," said Carlos Herrera, owner of a medium-sized ranch, "I've heard you had problems with Mr. Collins for disobeying orders. I can't risk hiring someone who might decide to ignore my instructions." Ranch after ranch, the story repeated. Michael saw how his grandfather was rejected again and again for a single act of compassion. Thunder, meanwhile, grew rapidly and developed in surprising ways. Despite the difficulties of the journey, the calf prospered, becoming an exceptionally strong and intelligent animal. "Look, Grandpa," Michael would say, "Thunder learns everything we teach him. He can walk with us without a rope, responds when we call him, and even seems to understand our conversations." It was true. Thunder had developed remarkable intelligence and loyalty. He followed Matt and Michael like a faithful dog, seemed to understand their moods, and showed extraordinary gentleness toward both. It was after 3 weeks of searching that fortune finally smiled. They arrived at a small property called Hope Springs Ranch, which belonged to Philip Morgan, an older man who managed a much smaller and more personal operation. Philip was a man of about 70 years with a very different philosophy. For him, animals were companions in rural life, not just economic units. When Matt explained his situation, expecting rejection once again, Philip listened with genuine attention. "Reynolds," he said after hearing the whole story, "any man who'd risk his job to save the life of a sick animal is exactly the type of person I want working on my ranch." Matt couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Really, Mr. Morgan?" "Of course," he responded with a warm smile. "I need an experienced cowboy, and you clearly have both technical knowledge and a compassionate heart. That's a rare and valuable combination." Philip offered them a small but comfortable house, a fair salary, and the freedom to raise Thunder alongside the rest of the cattle. It was more than Matt had dared to hope for. The settling at Hope Springs Ranch marked the beginning of a new chapter. Philip turned out to be not just a fair employer, but also a wise mentor. "Reynolds," he said during their first week, "I've managed this ranch for 50 years, and I've learned that the best cowboys are those who see animals as individuals, not as numbers." Michael adapted quickly to this new environment where his natural compassion was seen as a virtue. He continued his education under the guidance of his grandfather and Philip. Thunder prospered in extraordinary ways. The calf who'd been at death's door developed into an exceptional young bull. Strong, intelligent, docile with humans but imposing when necessary. "That animal is special," Philip would comment. "I've seen many bulls in my life, but never one with that combination of strength and intelligence." As Thunder grew, he began showing abilities that went beyond normal. He could distinguish between different human voices at great distances, responded to complex commands, and showed an almost supernatural capacity to understand problematic situations. "Grandpa," Michael said one day, "it's like Thunder knows we saved his life and is trying to pay us back." "Maybe that's so, son," Matt responded thoughtfully. "Animals have ways of showing gratitude that we don't always understand." When Thunder turned 3 years old, he'd become a local legend. His physical strength was extraordinary, he could work for hours without showing fatigue, and he had an endurance that seemed supernatural. Thunder's fame spread when he demonstrated a particular ability. He could pull stuck vehicles from mud with extraordinary efficiency and care. The first time happened during the rainy season, when a merchant got his truck stuck in a deep mud hole. Philip suggested trying with Thunder, though everyone was skeptical. To everyone's surprise, Thunder not only pulled out the truck, but did so with a precision that suggested he understood exactly the necessary force. "Incredible!" exclaimed the merchant. "That bull works better than a mechanical crane." News spread quickly, and soon people began coming to Hope Springs Ranch specifically for Thunder services. Philip began charging a modest fee, money he shared equitably with Matt and Michael. "Grandpa," Michael said, "Thunder is helping us financially. It's like he understands we're a family." During the following years, Thunder's reputation grew to become regional legend. He'd helped pull out stuck tractors, moved fallen trees blocking roads, performed dozens of tasks that normally would have required costly machinery. More important than his physical abilities was the emotional connection he'd developed with Matt and Michael. It was evident Thunder didn't just obey orders, but genuinely loved and protected the two humans who'd saved his life. "He's more like a son than an animal," Philip observed. "That bull understands what you sacrificed for him." Michael, now 21 years old and having become a skilled cowboy, had developed a special connection with Thunder that went beyond normal. They could communicate with subtle gestures, and both worked together with beautiful synchronization. It was an October afternoon in 1967, 6 years after Matt and Michael had arrived at Hope Springs Ranch, when a luxury automobile stopped on the road near the property. It was a black Cadillac, the type of vehicle rarely seen in that region. From the automobile emerged a well-dressed man of about 35 years, accompanied by a boy of approximately 10 years who was clearly distressed and crying. The man ran toward the house with an expression of total desperation. "Please," he shouted. "I need urgent help. My son is trapped." Philip, Matt, and Michael immediately came out. The man, who identified himself as Javier Collins, Armand's son, explained between sobs of panic. "We were visiting my father at Triple Creek Ranch when we decided to take a shortcut through a mountain road. The car went off and rolled down a ravine. I managed to get out, but my son Eduardo is trapped inside, and I can't get him out alone." Matt felt a mixture of emotions hearing the surname Collins. After 6 years, destiny had brought to his door the son of the man who'd expelled him. But stronger than any resentment was his instinct to help a child in danger. "Where's the accident?" he asked immediately. "About 2 miles from here, in the ravine by the creek," Javier responded. "The car is overturned against some rocks, and my son is conscious but can't move. I think his leg is trapped." Philip didn't hesitate. "Reynolds, prepare Thunder immediately. We're going to need all his strength to pull out that car without hurting the boy." While they prepared Thunder with ropes and special harnesses, Philip organized an emergency team. Javier quickly led them to the location, where they found a scene worse than imagined. The automobile had rolled several yards and had ended up overturned in a precarious position, with the front part crushed against a rock formation. From inside they could hear the boy's weak voice. "Dad, my leg hurts. I can't move." The situation was extremely delicate. The car was in a position where any abrupt movement could make it slide more, crushing the boy. "We need to extract him very carefully," Philip evaluated. "One wrong pull and the car could slide." Matt studied the situation carefully, calculating angles and the exact force necessary. "Thunder can do it," he said finally, "but we have to position him at exactly the right angle and make sure he understands he must pull gradually." While they prepared Thunder, Javier watched with a mixture of desperation and skepticism. "Are you sure a bull can do this without hurting my son more?" he asked anxiously. "Sir," Matt responded with confidence, "this animal understands exactly what he needs to do. He's done similar work hundreds of times." Michael approached Thunder and spoke to him softly. "Thunder, there's a boy trapped in that car. We need you to pull him out very carefully, very slowly, without hurting him. Do you understand?" To Javier's amazement, Thunder seemed to really understand. He approached the vehicle carefully, sniffed the situation, and positioned himself exactly where Matt had indicated. With a signal, Thunder began to pull, but not with brute force. He applied gradual and constant pressure, pausing periodically to allow the vehicle to settle. "Incredible," Javier murmured. "That animal really understands." After 20 minutes of meticulous work, Thunder had managed to extract the automobile from its dangerous position and position it on stable ground where rescuers could access the boy. Little Eduardo had a fractured leg but was alive and conscious. They managed to extract him and apply first aid before transporting him to the hospital. Javier, with tears of gratitude, approached Matt. "Sir," he said, "I don't know how to thank you. You and that extraordinary animal saved my son's life." He paused, observing Matt carefully. "Excuse me, but haven't we met before? Your face seems familiar." Matt knew the moment had arrived, but he felt no rancor. "Yes, we know each other," he responded with dignity. "I worked for your father for 40 years at Triple Creek Ranch. My name is Matthew Reynolds." Javier was speechless. Gradually, memories returned. He'd been present the day his father had expelled Matt for disobeying the order to put down a sick calf. You're the foreman my father fired for saving the life of a calf," he said slowly. "Yes," Matt confirmed. "And that calf I saved is the bull who just saved your son's life." The revelation hit Javier with the force of an epiphany. The act of compassion that had resulted in Matt's expulsion had created the circumstances that allowed the rescue of his own son years later. "I can't believe this," he murmured. "The animal my father ordered killed is the same one that saved Eduardo." "Kindness has mysterious ways of returning," Matt responded with wisdom. "When we do good, the universe finds ways to reward us, though sometimes we have to wait years to see it." Michael, who'd been observing, approached and added, "Mr. Collins, Thunder never forgot that we saved him when he was a baby. His whole life he's been trying to return that kindness. Today he was able to save a life like we saved his. Javier looked at Thunder, who stood calmly after completing the rescue, and felt an emotion he'd never experienced. A mixture of gratitude, admiration, and deep regret for the injustice his father had committed. "Mr. Reynolds," he said with a broken voice, "my father made a terrible mistake when he fired you. You demonstrated more compassion and wisdom in one day than we have in years." He moved closer to the old man and continued, "I want to compensate you for the injustice you suffered. Whatever price you ask for that bull, I'll pay it. I want to buy him to make sure he has the life he deserves." But Matt gently shook his head. "Mr. Collins, this animal has no price. Not because he's economically valuable, but because he represents something more important than money." Michael joined in. "Thunder is part of our family. We've grown together, we've worked together, we've learned together. It's not about money." Javier insisted, "But there must be something I can do to show my gratitude." Matt thought for a moment. "If you really want to do something, tell this story. Tell your father what happened today. Tell him how the compassion he punished 6 years ago saved his grandson's life today. And," Michael added, "always remember that kindness toward animals and toward people always returns somehow. It may take time, but it always returns." Javier solemnly promised to do exactly that. That night, after ensuring his son received appropriate medical attention, Javier visited his father at Triple Creek Ranch and told him the entire story of the rescue. Armand listened to the account with growing amazement and finally with deep regret. For the first time in his life, he faced the real consequences of having valued profits over compassion. "Are you saying," Armand asked slowly, "that the calf I ordered killed is the same animal that saved Eduardo's life?" "Exactly, Dad. The act of compassion you punished 6 years ago became the act of salvation that preserved your grandson today." Armand remained silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke with a humility his son had never heard. "I made a terrible mistake with Matt Reynolds. I punished kindness and rewarded harshness. Now I see that his compassion was exactly the quality I should have valued most." In the following days, Armand did something that surprised the entire region. He personally traveled to Hope Springs Ranch to ask Matt's forgiveness and offer him his job back, with increased salary and greater responsibility. But Matt, with the wisdom gained during years of honest work, gently declined the offer. "Mr. Collins," he said with respect but firmness, "I appreciate that you came to speak with me, and I accept your apology. But I've found a home here with Philip, where I can work according to my values. Besides," he added with a smile, "Thunder is happy here, and after everything that's happened, I think we deserve to keep the family together in a place where we're valued for who we are." Armand respected the decision, but before leaving he made a final offer. "If you ever need anything at all, please come to me. I owe you more than I can express." Now, dear friends, before continuing with the conclusion of this extraordinary story, allow me to invite you to be part of our community. If this story has touched your heart, if you felt the emotion of seeing how kindness returns multiplied, I ask that you leave your like on this video. Subscribe to our channel so you don't miss more stories that remind us of the values that really matter in life. Activate the notification bell to be the first to receive our new videos. And above all, share the story with your loved ones, because messages like this need to be heard by more people. Leave us in the comments. Have you lived any experience where an act of kindness returned to you unexpectedly? We'd love to read your stories. The following years brought increasing prosperity and happiness for Matt, Michael, and Thunder at Hope Springs Ranch. The story of their kindness and the miraculous rescue spread throughout the region, bringing respect and admiration from the entire community. Michael married a beautiful young woman named Elena from the neighboring town and had children of his own, whom he raised with the same values of compassion and honest work he'd learned from his grandfather. Matt lived to 78 years old, watching his great-grandchildren grow and transmitting his knowledge to a new generation. Thunder lived a long and prosperous life, becoming father to many calves who inherited his exceptional intelligence and gentleness. When he finally died of old age at 18 years, the entire community attended his farewell, recognizing he'd been more than an animal. He'd been a living symbol of the power of compassion and gratitude. That bull, Philip said at the ceremony, taught us that when we save a life with love, that life finds ways to save other lives in return. Armand, now a transformed old man, spoke with a broken voice. Thunder changed my life and my family's life in ways I can never repay. He taught me that true strength comes from compassion, not from harshness. Michael built a simple but beautiful monument at the place where Thunder was buried, with an inscription that summarized his life. Here lies Thunder, the bull who taught an entire region about gratitude, loyalty, and the power of love to transform lives. Saved by kindness, he lived to demonstrate that acts of compassion are never lost, but multiply through generations. Final message. Dear friends, this is the story of Matthew Reynolds, his grandson Michael, and Thunder, the bull whose life teaches us that acts of kindness are never lost in the void of time. This story reminds us that when we choose compassion over convenience, when we value life over profit, when we treat all creatures with dignity and respect, we don't just make the world better for them, but we create a better world for ourselves and for our children. There are moments in life where we must choose between obeying unjust orders or following the voice of our conscience. Matt chose compassion, and though it cost him 40 years of job stability, that choice ended up saving the life of an innocent child years later. Destiny has mysterious ways of balancing accounts. Divine justice doesn't always arrive when we expect it, but it always arrives. And when it arrives, it reminds us that every act of kindness we perform is a seed planted in the garden of the future. Thunder wasn't just an exceptional animal. He was living proof that gratitude exists in all creatures, that loyalty knows no species boundaries, and that love given always returns multiplied. The lesson this story leaves us is clear. Never underestimate the power of a single act of compassion. Never think our kindness is insignificant or that it makes no difference. Because every life we touch with love, every creature we help in its moment of need, every time we choose mercy over convenience, we're planting seeds of a future we cannot imagine. Matt lost his job, but gained his dignity. He lost his stability, but gained his inner peace. And in the end, his act of kindness returned to him in the most beautiful way possible, saving an innocent life and demonstrating to the entire world that he was right. May this story inspire each of you to choose compassion when facing difficult decisions, to defend the defenseless even when it has a cost, and to always remember that kindness is never wasted, but transforms into blessings that return at the perfect moment. May the memory of Matthew Reynolds, his grandson Michael, and Thunder the Brave Bull continue inspiring us all to live lives of greater compassion, greater kindness, and greater respect for all forms of life that share our world. Because at the end of the day, we won't be remembered for how much money we earned or how much power we had, but for how much kindness we sowed and how many lives we touched with love. This is the story still told on ranches across the West, where wise grandparents share with their grandchildren the eternal lessons about the transforming power of love, the importance of defending the defenseless, and the truth that kindness always finds its way back to us. Thank you for accompanying us on this extraordinary journey.